everyone, it's Nikki and welcome back to Live a Little, your cozy corner of the internet where we talk about all of the in-between bits of life where you may not necessarily feel like you have someone to talk to about them, whether it's the honest parts, the unpolished parts and the messy parts. We discuss it all judgment-free here. So for today's topic, I wanted to talk about decentering the male gaze. And what I mean by that is I feel like I personally grew up so aware of male validation or acceptance, and especially I think when I was in school I was so conscious of the fact that I didn't have male validation or acceptance, and I think in turn I don't think we realize how much the things that we experience or don't experience growing up can affect us long term, and we internalize it for a longer amount of time than we're going through it. And so I think for me, the male gaze, if you don't really know what it is basically the idea that you get validation based on mainly men finding you attractive or pretty, and the whole idea of pretty privilege and how that changes how you move through life, or how other people move through life towards you, or how you're treated or you're not treated in positive and negative ways. And I kind of just really wanted to talk about how the pressure that we put on ourselves, especially to do with the opposite sex or just, you know, people that like we hope would find us attractive or accept us, how that can be really detrimental in both ways. I've been having a lot of conversations with my friends recently about just the idea of pretty privilege and what it's like to grow up with it, and the pros of that and the cons of that. But equally, me being someone that didn't grow up having the male gaze and being the kind of stereotypical standard of what being attractive is, I think it came with its own issues and its own difficulties that I am still contending with today. I think these especially started from school and have kind of lessened, but are still in the back of my head as things that I worry about and think about. So I really just wanted to dive into what it means to have the male gaze and how it shapes us and how we move through the world, and what it's like when we try our best to decenter that. This isn't a topic or a episode where it's nothing to do with blaming anyone. I'm not blaming men. I'm not blaming, like, it's not a blame game. It's me really just wanting to explore and unpick where that need for validation comes from, especially from men. You know, I think it's not just because of society. It's not just because of media. It's not just because of like kind of cultures or values. I think it's all got a big part to play in the bigger idea of it. And obviously with social media being more prevalent than ever, I think you're more exposed than ever to what is deemed as being stereotypically attractive and therefore getting male attention, and the opposite. And I think growing up, obviously being someone with a facial difference, I didn't grow up ever getting noticed or chosen by people, mainly boys that were my age. And I think there is something that not being chosen, even just in life, it could be literally the same as like, say you're choosing a group in, I don't know, PE, and you're the last to be picked in this lineup of people choosing who they want in their group. I think that can do something much deeper to your psyche than like, and your, I don't know, your perception of self than what it may just be seen as and how it meets the eye. And I think that's basically what I want to discuss, is how the situations and the experiences we have or don't have such a massive part to play in adulthood, basically. So being someone that grew up not being chosen or acknowledged really by boys, I found really difficult. I was always the friend of friends who boys would come to me to speak about my friends with me and ask me, oh, does so-and-so, do you know if they like me or they like anyone or if they're seeing anyone? And I was always happy to like be my friend's wing woman and also be my friend's like protection, like, no, they're not interested. But equally, I think it's that whole like always the bridesmaid, never the bride thing, where if people are only ever coming to you about someone else and not you, I think that can be very damaging, because if you're never chosen, how do you know that you are desired in that way? And I think it's not necessarily like ultimately none of us should move through the world for external validation, whether it's male, female, whoever it may be. None of us should live for the validation of others. However, I think being someone that didn't grow up with being stereotypically attractive looking and being kind of wanted, it really was internalized from a very early age that because I wasn't chosen, I wasn't good enough, and because I wasn't good enough, I would never be good enough. And I think because so much of what boys, especially at such like a young age, talk about is to do with appearance. You know, we both do it. It's not just boys. It's everyone does it. You are so much more. I mean, even like you could be 60 and still be skin deep. But I think especially like in school, it feels like, what is the point of even having personality traits if all you're going to be judged on is your appearance and your figure and just really objectifying things? But I think I was so aware of the narrative that, oh, this girl was attractive because of this, whether it be, I don't know, her stereotypically beautiful face or her body or whatever it may be. And I was so aware that I didn't have that with my face, especially. It kind of already just took me out of the running. And I think what that then meant is it was quite stunting to my perception of myself, in that I really massively seeked validation, not just from like boys and people that I maybe had crushes on, but just everyone. You know, I think one of the biggest compliments that people can pay you when you're younger is just that you're pretty or you're beautiful or you're attractive, or for the opposite, you're good looking or you're handsome or whatever it may be. And it's as old as time. It's even when you're a baby, it's like, oh, she's so beautiful, she has your lips, or she looks just like you. And the same for like, oh, he's so handsome, he's going to grow up to be so handsome. Like, it is from the age of time, just appearance is kind of embedded to like defining characteristics of a person, when actually they mean the least at all in terms of like what makes you human and what gives you value. But unfortunately, when appearance becomes such a massive part of conversation, and whether people basically give you time or accept you or give you attention, it can be so damaging to your sense of self and how much you value yourself and your self-worth. You know, growing up, I was always the friend that, because guys would come to, it was really difficult because it was tangled up in a lot of like years of feeling like I had to look a certain way to be valued and considered and be desired. And because I didn't have those things, I never felt desired. And I definitely believe that in life, no one exists for external validation or validation from the opposite sex. But equally, if you don't know that you are desired in that way, how do you know that you are ever desired in that way? And so I think it was quite damaging, and it then meant that I kind of feared boys for a lot of my life. Like, I had no guy friends even till sixth form, when I finally had like a group of guy friends in my life, because I was so scared to even look boys in the eyes, and I put them on such a pedestal and like kind of had all these preconceptions in my mind that, oh, they don't think I'm attractive, they think I'm ugly, they think I'm a monster, this, that and the other, that I was so scared to even look in the eye line and direction of a boy, even in a platonic way, even in just a friendly way. I beat myself down so much by the fact that I could never be to boys at school what some of my other friends were, that I just was so scared to even interact with them, basically, because I felt like I was only used for one thing, which was kind of like, I was like the ugly friend that made my other friends look even more attractive. No one made me feel like that. I just felt like that. I remember there was a film called The Duff that came out in like 2015, and the Duff stood for Designated Ugly Fat Friend, which is super damaging. And I remember the film basically just being about how like there's always this third friend that's less attractive and less like pleasing to look at or less desirable than the other two friends, to make them look better or to make them look more attractive. And again, they are the friend that boys will speak to about their friends, is like the middleman. And I remember watching The Duff and resonating with it so much. Obviously the word duff is just gross, and like, you know, it does not, never should stand, but as a thing. But the premise behind it, I remember really resonating with, especially with me, because being someone with a facial difference, there is nothing that I could do to change my appearance, even if I tried desperately. I remember watching videos on YouTube that was like, how to get a guy to like you. And this was at like age 8 or 9, really early. And it was always about appearance-based things. It was wearing red lipstick or pushing on a certain type of perfume, or, you know, things that were so skin deep. And obviously, as someone with a facial difference whose appearance was changing in ways I absolutely couldn't control and I couldn't change, I felt like the only way to be liked from a very early age was to match what everyone else looked like and do these things like wear red lipstick. And I couldn't change the biggest thing about me that I felt like was making me be seen as not desirable, which was my face. And I think that's really damaging. I feel like from a very early age, I had kind of told myself like, I'm probably going to be alone forever, and like that's okay. I'd almost made peace with it. And I'd tell people that. I'd be like, oh, you know, if there's ever a day that I am in a relationship, or if there's ever a day that I'm married, then, you know, I'll do this or do that. But it was never like when scenario. Whenever I thought about like the future, it was always a if there is ever, because I'd kind of convinced myself that I wasn't lovable and I wasn't good enough, and I would never be seen as any more than like my appearance. And at that age, boys and people, just people in general, don't care to get to know you more than what is skin deep, really, especially if it's romantic. And I think even now with, you know, the era of dating apps and DM sliding, it makes that even more prevalent and skin deep, which is obviously not good and not great for people like me. And just full stop, it's not great for anyone. But I feel like, yeah, it was really, really difficult, because from a very early age, I was just so aware that I was never in the discussion of like who the liked girls were at my school or in my friendship group. And that comes with its own issues as well, which I'm going to get into. You know, as I've got older, I think growing up, I had a lot of like envy towards girls that were just stereotypically popular and attractive and liked and likable and seen within the male gaze, and had male validation. But actually that comes with a lot of issues in itself. And so I think basically as I've got older, I've just really tried my best to decenter what it means to be a valued person and have value within yourself as a human being. And when I was younger, so much of my value, like towards myself and self-worth, came from my lack of validation from others. But as I've got older, I've realized that when we do try and decenter that, that's when actually we stop performing for others and changing and molding ourselves to others. Because I felt like, because I couldn't change my appearance, I could try and change how I acted. I could try and change, I don't know, what I was interested in, or basically my whole identity outside of my appearance, because that was something that was like a concrete thing that there was no movement with, which I found really difficult. In sixth form, I feel like it was the first time when I made friends with other boys for the first time, and it was meaningful relationships, that I realized like, wow, not all boys have this kind of one type of view of girls. And, you know, it's completely okay to be like, oh, so-and-so is attractive or is good looking. Like, we can all appreciate one another for our appearance. Like, that's completely fine. And it's also nice. It's a nice, you know, boost when you're complimented for your appearance, by all means. But equally, I think because I was so scared of boys in general, because of me feeling like, I don't know, I would never be chosen, I missed out on like having meaningful relationships with boys that were not so skin deep. And I think also a lot of that comes from growing. You know, boys that I'm now friends with, I probably would not have been friends with in like year 8 when I was like 13, because they would have been the same as everyone else, and vice versa. You know, it can be the same with girls as well. And what I have learned though is that appearance only gets you so far in a relationship with someone, in a meaningful relationship, and looks do completely fade. And of course, unfortunately, looks may draw you to someone or mean that they give you their time, unlike they would if you didn't fit a certain mold or desirability, which is just also like not a nice thing to say in terms of like being quite objectifying. I've learned that actually once I've got to know, especially my male friendships in the last couple of years, they've got so much more meaningful and fulfilling the longer I've been friends with them. But yeah, I feel like I, growing up, had a really kind of warped perspective on male friendships as well. I feel like because I never was shown healthy male validation from as long as I can remember to present day, I could never decipher the difference between someone being just friendly and being kind and maybe liking me. And I think I would always kind of romanticize and exacerbate literally just someone being a genuine nice person into like, oh, maybe they like me, or I would just romanticize them even if I did not like them in that way, because I felt like, oh, maybe this is my chance, maybe this is my opportunity. And I was really not used to getting any attention from boys, that any tiny sliver of attention I got, I would hyperfixate on. If it was literally as simple as like, I don't know, a boy holding the door open for me as we went into a lesson and being like, after you, I would be like, oh, and I'd become obsessed with that interaction because it was so few and far between that it almost feels like out of body. Like if you don't know something to be normal or to be a part of your life, then when it comes in, it feels so like out of the ordinary, that I feel like it was almost quite detrimental to me then forming healthy relationships with boys that were the exception to the rule at the time, because I would just romanticize every little interaction with them because it was just not normal. It was like a foreign concept to me that boys could just be decent and be kind and not want anything from me. And also like, I think because I was so not used to, I don't know, anyone giving me the time of day or being kind to me in that way, especially like maybe people I liked or things like that, that someone who I maybe just wanted a bit of validation from, not even in a romantic way, but just to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, I then would like, my brain would instantly turn that into like me romanticizing them and being like, oh, I've got a crush on them. But actually looking back, a lot of the time I did not have crushes on these people. I just wanted to be acknowledged and validated. I think we all have that. We all crave attention, and that is completely okay. As humans, all we want is to be acknowledged, even if that acknowledgement sometimes isn't in the form that is healthy or is enjoyable. Sometimes, like, I was speaking to one of my friends, Danny. I was actually on her podcast, and I was kind of talking about this topic of the male gaze and how I didn't grow up ever getting attention from boys, and therefore I never thought it was possible. Like, if you don't grow up receiving it at all, how do you know it's even something that's possible? It's like anything. It's like, I don't know, if you don't see someone that looks like you become a lawyer and you want to be a lawyer, how do you even know you can do that? It's that same idea. If you don't experience it, how do you know it's possible? And she was saying that like there's times that she would be catcalled or given unwanted attention on the street, which is obviously not okay and absolutely terrible. But when she was feeling low in her worth, sometimes even if it was the wrong type of attention, it would be what she needed. And so I think it's very human and it's very normal to just want attention and validation from others. And it's very, very hard to validate yourself. It's really difficult to fill up your own cup. I feel like we all go through life with a cup like this, like, please put a little penny in my cup, like, validate me, please, make me feel good enough and wanted and seen and heard and pretty and loved and like a good person. Just like each coin is like a bit of validation. And I grew up being told I was inspiring and being told that I was like, I don't know, brave, but I was never told that I was beautiful, ever. Like, even now, I've like not been told ever by a boy my age that I'm beautiful. And that can be so detrimental because then you will never know that you are deemed beautiful by people that you may have crushes on or you may like or you may, you know, want futures with. And I think that can be really damaging. But then on the opposite side, girls that are stereotypically attractive and beautiful grow up with a cup being filled with you're beautiful, you're good looking, you've got a great figure, which is all just very objectifying, horrible surface level stuff. But they're validated in a different way. But they're never told they're kind. They're never told that they've got a good heart. They're never told that they're smart. And so both can be incredibly, like, they're completely opposing things, but can both be really damaging. And I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing it's so important to fill up your own cup. It's so much easier said than done. I am so good at giving other people advice and not taking 1 ounce of it. We all do it. I can very objectively be like, well, this is what you do. But am I ever going to take that on? No. But at least I'm learning that it's really important to fill up my own cup by doing things that are completely outside of myself. You know, I operate in an industry that is very surface level. I am in an industry of social media, and you're judged based on how you look. My whole life has been a narrative of being judged on how I was being judged on how I looked, but in a way that was negative majority of the time because I looked different and not deemed as like stereotypically attractive. And so I think what I've really been trying to do to heal that massive like hole in myself that's like, someone please just tell me I'm beautiful and like mean it and validate me in that way and make me feel wanted and chosen and like not a second choice or a choice at all for that matter. I was never even the second choice. Equally, I think it's really important to do things that completely decenter your external view of yourself by doing things that have nothing to do with that exercise parts of you like your kind heart or your smartness or your intelligence or your humor. I think it's really, really important to do things that exercise and express characteristics you have. For example, like I love painting and I love baking and I love, you know, making things for the people I love. Like that's a big love language for me. And so I think I'm really trying to heal myself or remove a bit of that like need for external attention or want for it and crave, like hope for it by doing things that have nothing to do with my appearance. Because my job, whether I like it or not, will always have something to do with my appearance. Everyone's job will. Everyone's sense of self and identity will always have something to do with their appearance, whether they like it or not. But none of us were ever meant to operate in this world having constant access to what we look like. We were never meant to always have a mirror in our hand by mean of our phone. We were never meant to stare at ourselves, you know, in the screen or in the mirror or in wherever it may be as much as we do now. Never meant to do that. We were never meant to have this much pride or care over how we looked. Like in the caveman era, people didn't even brush their hair. You know, it's like we have so much external pressure about our appearance. And I think I'm really trying my best to decenter even just a tiny bit by challenging myself to operate through my day less externally by doing things that are completely unrelated to my appearance. Firstly, for validation and for fulfillment, but equally that fill up my own cup and are quite healing. But equally not relying so much on mirrors, not relying so much on everything having to be perfect, because ultimately my appearance will never be the gold standard of perfection, and I've accepted that now. And whereas before I was striving for that so deeply, I know that will never be me. Of course, there's like a still massive hole inside me that hopes for that, but I know that can never be me, and so I don't strive for that anymore. I try and strive for the other qualities that I have that make me feel like a more full, whole person. My kindness, my empathy, my compassion, all of these things that are actually a lot deeper than you're beautiful, even though of course it's nice being told that. Of course, I've had quite a lot of scenarios where I've had friendships that have kind of turned into something awkwardly more. Well, I say a lot too, scenarios where I've had friendships with boys that have kind of turned into more, and I've not really known how to deal with that because it's never quite gone to dating, but we've done a lot of date-like things. So for example, in sixth form, I became close to a guy and we did so many date-like things. We went to the cinema and he would buy my cinema tickets. We went to exhibitions. We went to the park. We went shopping. People were literally, it was to the point that people were asking if we were dating. It was my first experience with like being properly validated. But again, he would never make comments about my appearance. It was just, we enjoyed each other's company essentially, but even that was so rare and so nice that I was like, oh my god, like I became quite obsessive about it very quickly. And I started thinking that I liked him, but actually I think I just liked being liked because it was so foreign to me to feel chosen. And also when you haven't had clear examples of male validation, you don't know how to decipher it from just being friendly. But it was ultimately like him love bombing me and giving me so much attention. Like at school, he would make a beeline for me and my friends would be like, Nikki, what is going on here? Like there's something going on. And I think I've always been so scared to admit like, oh, I like someone because, or they might like me, because I felt like for a lot of my life, I grew up delusional where I was like, oh, I've just made this interaction into something it never was. So when I had my other friends telling me like, he likes you, like I was like, oh, I'm not actually crazy, he likes me. I've always believed I will never ever believe someone likes me unless they verbatim say I like you, because I had such a low sense of worth. And so I was like, this is so new for me, this is so scary, but I kind of latched onto it because it was, again, foreign. But then yeah, so we were hanging out most days for like 3 months, and then suddenly he just pulled away, and we'd gone from speaking every single day without fail to like not once in a week, which was very rare. A week's not a long time, but it's very rare for us at that time. And I really distinctively remember my friends FaceTiming me. It was a group call. They all called me on this group call. And I was like, oh my God, am I in trouble? What's going on? And I was like, hello? And they told me, Nikki, check his so-and-so's Instagram story. And at this point, like he'd posted me like in a photo dump, like of us when we went shopping together, and we hadn't done anything. We hadn't like kissed or had any conversations in that way. And he would tell like our mutual friends like, oh, I don't like Nikki like that. And then the boys would say like, well, don't lead her on then. And I remember checking his story, and essentially he'd posted a photo or a quote saying, I love my girlfriend. And in this 1 week that we'd not spoken, he'd met a girl, made her his girlfriend, and was like off to the races with this relationship. And he'd been love bombing me and like doing date like things with me for 3 months, getting like jealous and doing actually really jealous weird things, like getting into an argument with one of his guy friends when he sat next to me, doing all of these really kind of protective and actually red flag things. It wasn't good, so I dodged a bullet there. But it was kind of reinstating every negative belief in myself that I was trying my best to like work on, which was I'm not good enough to have the label of girlfriend. Like I'm not good enough to be seen as like a girlfriend. I'm fun to talk to, I'm fun to hang out with, but I'm not good enough to have that label. And I think that's what's really difficult. You know, I felt even more like unlovable and even more felt like my worst enemy, and it was embarrassing. I think, you know, I'd hear friends talking about boys and relationships and kisses at parties, or I don't know, getting with people, and I never had anything to add. And even now I often don't. And when I rarely go to parties or bars, I'd spend hours getting ready, hoping maybe this would be the night that someone tapped me on the shoulder or tried to speak to me or paid me a compliment. And I actually even pretended that I'd had my first kiss before I'd actually had it, because everyone else around me had. And I think when you have a timeline of like what is normalized, like, oh yeah, I had my first kiss at like 14, or like, oh yeah, we did stuff at like this age. When you feel like the only one that hasn't done that, you're like, what is wrong with me? And it's something that's really not spoken about. Therefore, there is so many people that are in the same boat, but because no one ever talks about it, you really feel like everything is wrong with you and that you'll never, ever, ever be clubbed in with the rest of your friends. And obviously teen rom-coms didn't help. I'd watch all of these films like To All the Boys I Loved Before, or like all of these rom-coms where essentially the underdog girl gets the popular guy or vice versa. And they were always in some way conventionally pretty still. And I clung to those stories and convinced myself that maybe if I just have that moment, like it will happen for me. But life isn't a rom-com. And you know, I had to stop putting men on a pedestal and stop romanticizing them and reminding myself that they aren't Disney princes, and I'm not a Disney princess. No one is. We're all just people, and we're all imperfect and flawed and human. And I realized that everyone is on their own timeline. Some people marry at 60. Some will never get married. Some leap from relationship to relationship without ever being alone long enough to know themselves truly. And none of them are wrong at all. They're all just different. And what I am grateful to say is that I, at 21, deeply know myself, my hopes, what fulfills me, my faults, my strengths. And I feel like now, if I entered a relationship one day, if that happens, I always still talk with if, not when, because I just still like have internalized that so much that maybe it's just not going to happen for me. I'll come into it with a stronger sense of self. And that is a privilege, because a lot of people are defined by their relationships with the opposite sex, because it's for what, as long as they've known, has defined who they are as a person. And for me, you know, I've kind of developed like a bullshit meter, in the sense that, like, because a lot of people haven't got the time to get to know me or taken the time to get to know me in a romantic way or a platonic way, I've got to really know what people are like at their core. Because when you have pretty privilege, you will be treated differently. You will be treated maybe better at the beginning. And so I feel like I have got to know so many people in good ways and bad ways that I wouldn't have otherwise if I'd have just been like everyone else. And I've got to know so many deeper, like more philosophical life lessons and what the true meaning of life and being a human is, and a good human is, so much earlier than a lot of people can or do. You know, we live in a world obsessed with appearance, and it's easy to feel like your worth is based on how you look. But value exists beyond a mirror, far beyond a mirror. And, you know, people often say something like, you'll find someone when you're not looking. But how do you stop looking? It's a natural part of life. And that phrase can be so damaging, because it's like impossible to not want to search for someone to validate you and love you and accept you as who you are. And it's okay to think about it. Just try not to let it define you. And, you know, I think attention gives you proof of being desired. I wanted to quickly run through speaking to one of my friends who we actually weren't friends majority of school, because not because of any way, but I think internally I was like, I envy you so much. You appear popular, you appear liked by boys, like basically all the things that I didn't have, she had. And now we just laugh about it, because she's like, Nikki, it's not how it felt at all. And actually it's been really interesting and like enlightening hearing about what it's like to have the male gaze and have attention from boys, and actually how it can be detrimental. And so I messaged her yesterday and I was like, do you mind if I like note in a few points that you would say are the pros and cons to having pretty privilege, aka moving through the world as a stereotypically attractive person to mainly the opposite sex? And she said some of the pros of being someone that is, you know, deemed especially attractive are that people are quicker to accept you or welcome you into a friendship group and adopt you, because ultimately you also make them look better by association, and therefore they're more likely to give you time of day and get to know you. But that can equally, as a con, be completely more skin deep and in an objectifying and sexualizing way. And as a result, she was saying a con is that you end up doing that to yourself. You know, if you know that you can get that approval or sense of worth through your appearance, then that is where you place your sense of worth. And you then put even more onus on winning it from everyone around you, which is where the whole idea of I think, pick me girl can be really damaging. We've all done it in the past where we're like, oh, her behavior is not it. She's being a bit of a pick me, which is where you like are spending more time trying to chase male attention than like with girls and friendships in that way. But I think a lot of it is no one's fault, but like they've been proven that their worth comes from attention in that way, and therefore that's how they strive to get their cup filled, basically. And then she said another pro is that people will remember you based on features and therefore speak about you and remember you more positively. So then there can be more opportunities in making friendships or in romantic relationships or in career progression versus the latter, which is what I've experienced, which is the opposite. It's not, doesn't stop you, but it makes you less likely. It's kind of that you're given almost like a ladder up to these things when you are initially stereotypically attractive to someone. The second con, she said, is of course unwanted harassment and attention, and then your appearance getting blamed for the attention. And 99% of my friends have experienced unwanted harassment from people, whether it's in the street or online, based on their appearance. And that is something that I have never experienced. I've experienced the parallel, which is harassment based on my face because it's different, but never based on like the fact that people think you're attractive and therefore harass you for it, which is horrible. It's completely not okay. And so that's obviously a con, is that like you'll be blamed for being seen as stereotypically attractive or what you were wearing or things like that. And so, yeah, you basically place all your values in what boys say. And then I guess another like quick pro is that appearance in especially today's society, and always has been, is a currency. It's aspirational. A lot of the celebrities we look up to, actors, actresses, whoever it may be, they all have one thing in common, and that is that they're stereotypically deemed as attractive by everyone, not just men, everyone. They're aspirational for young girls to look at and be like, I want to look like or be like her when I grow up. And then for men or whoever it may be, oh, I want to date her. Like, I would love to have someone that looked like that I was going out with. And it's somewhat a measure of success because insecurities sell, aspiration sells, and it's very unlikely you'll see an it girl that doesn't have appearance and aesthetic traits that people want to live up to. But then a con is that you're not very taken seriously when you have more stereotypical looks, because, you know, it's the whole like looks or books thing. You're not going to be taken so seriously if you're seen to have pride in your appearance or take time in your appearance. And, you know, if you're seen as spending less time on your appearance, then you're smarter. Like, that's instantly the whole like the nerd idea. So then I've often seen that like some of my friends in jobs will just not go in with makeup on because they feel like they have to decrease their individuality to be taken more seriously. And so I think that's where I've really learned that though I can envy certain aspects of what some of my friends, like this friend, was going through at school by being overheard, you know, by guys saying like, oh, she's beautiful, or like, oh, I'd love to date her, or whatever it may be. And she's had life experiences earlier because of that with boys. That doesn't make it any better or easier. It's just different. We've both had contrasting issues, but both to do with our appearance and perception of self, the lack of attention from boys, and then the unwanted or overarching lack of attention from boys. You know, both can be damaging in themselves. I had a really good conversation with one of my male friends. We love to like have a really deep conversation. He's actually kind of, I'd say, the first guy where I was like, wow, you really have like a level of depth that I haven't known before with, you know, men, and it's beautiful to see. And he's really in touch with his emotions, and it's amazing. And we often like will just talk about deep stuff for fun. And during summer we went to Primrose Hill, which is a park in Primrose Hill Park, a park in London. And we both got bagels and we sat at the top of the hill and we were just talking about dating. He was in a relationship at the time. And he was just asking me about dating, because we don't really talk about that stuff. And I was saying, like, I find it really difficult when everything is so surface level and skin deep, and how little I've experienced in the world of dating based on my appearance and being judged for it, and preconceived notions to do with that. And he said, like, Nikki, I promise you, like, and I was also saying my face was like a barrier to entry. It's like a book being judged by its cover before I even get to speak, or you read the words inside the book. And he said to me, Nikki, the first, like, if I looked through 50 lists of words to describe you, the last thing that I would see in that list is anything to do with your appearance and anything to do with your face. And there was something in that was quite healing. Obviously, I tell myself my appearance doesn't matter like society or my internal self and younger self has made it feel like it does. Of course, we all want to have pride in our appearance and look nice, because that in turn makes us feel more confident and feel nice, like by all means. But it's not a defining characteristic, and it's not what will keep people sticking around. And I think that was a really healing conversation for me to have, that he probably doesn't know was healing, because it was basically from a man's mouth telling me there is so much more added value you have in our relationship, our platonic relationship, that is completely bigger than anything to do with your appearance, and I don't even see you for your appearance. And I think that's the thing, is I felt so defined by my appearance and the lack of like stereotypical, beauty that I had as part of it, but equally so defined by it that like I couldn't even just have a normal conversation with someone without feeling like this is like a barrier and it's like staring them in the face. That I'd walk through school with my head down. I remember walking in through like the school gates like this, because I was just so scared to look anyone in the eyes, because I told myself I was a monster, I wasn't lovable, I wasn't accepted by men, women, anyone. And so what was the point? And that was really healing for me to have, for my younger self, I think, to like be told you're so much more than your appearance, and I see you for so much more. I don't even think about that. And actually, whether it be positive or negative, I just don't think about your appearance. And I think that's what is really important, is out of basically that whole conversation, what I got out is that I'm defined by so much more than my appearance, and what makes our relationship deep and special and meaningful and important. And I think though I know that, and you can tell yourself that, hearing that from like, the group of people's mouth that you've always feared and always like kind of made you feel this way based on just what you've experienced growing up, it was really, healing and like poignant for me. So he'll never know how much that like that whole kind of conversation impacted me. But it just, it made me feel like I'm seen and I'm valued for so much more than my appearance. And I think the opposite can be said, where people that have pretty privilege don't feel seen and valued for more than their appearance, or got to know food so much deeper. So it goes both ways. But ultimately, when you decenter, the male gaze, but just the external gaze in general, I've just called it the male gaze because that's what it's called in society really, but just external gaze in general as defining factors of how you perform in front of people, or your appearance, or what fulfills you, then there's so much growth in that and so much development. And so what I want to say is, for my little thought of the week, try to move through your day 24 hours where your appearance is an afterthought. I know it's like we wake up, we brush our teeth, we look in the mirror, but try your best to literally navigate through the day as if mirrors don't exist. Try your best to actively avoid them. Your selfie camera, anything, it's freeing. I basically think like it's really important to do something that is completely unrelated to your looks, like painting, a sport you love, spending time with family, spending time around people that fill your cup and love you for just you. Because when there's so much noise in society, you forget that you are so much more than your appearance. You do, especially when dating feels so fickle and feels so surface level and feels so black and white, like, oh, swipe, tick, like, you need to know and you need to reassure yourself that you are so much bigger and better than who deems you as attractive or who doesn't, and who gives you the time of day for that or who doesn't. People lived without reflections for most of human history and they survived just fine. Let yourself experience that freedom. And even if it's just for one day, I promise you will feel so freed for being pulled from the clutches that are, all of the pressures you put on yourself and society and experiences put on you, especially experiences from being a child. So thank you for sitting with me through this. I hope it reminds you that you're not alone if you've ever felt like the side character in someone else's story. I think it's something that I have thought about a lot, and it's not linear. I'm still having to tell myself I am good enough. My existence isn't here to be appeased for, external validation, especially from people that I would hope I would get it from. And it's a journey, especially when you're so used to not being chosen, not being picked, and having every example of other person being that with you. It's so hard not to internalize that. We're all humans. So try your best to give yourself a break and do things that are completely disrelated and not anything to do with what makes you who you are on the outside. I feel in a landscape of social media and technology and online dating and all of these things, this is more prevalent than ever to discuss. We are not valued by our appearance. If anything, that is the complete opposite of what as humans makes us all valuable to one another. It's connection, so much deeper than this. And it all fades. We're all going to be old, grey, wrinkly. So yeah, everyone needs to just kind of stop being so skin deep and look in the mirror less and actually get to know someone for who they are beyond the surface. But yeah, I love you all lots. I hope this has made you feel less alone or seen or just been thought-provoking, as always, with these Live a Little episodes. As always, be kind to yourself. I love ya, and live a little.